Hello everyone. Today we're talking about the libertarianism and the state debate between Shane Killian, that guy T, versus the alt-hype and Sean Last. First off, I'd like to start by saying this was an excellent debate. There was not a whole lot of disagreement between the two parties. It was more of like a discussion rather than a debate. In the case of Sean Last and the alt-hype, well, it's come to a point where the ethno-state discussion is no longer a discussion of the moral disagreements with establishing the ethno-state. We've already won that debate time and time again. The only issues left are the technical aspects. How will you get it done? How is it going to function? Who's going to be a part of it? Things like this. This is the only objection that can even gain some ground with people who are against the idea of an ethno-state. As far as the people involved, Shane Killian, I would have to say, is probably the most cucked of all of these people. He's an open borders ANCAP, and we'll get to why he's so wrong. That guy T is great. I like watching his content, even though we disagree on things. I think he's still a very reasonable, intelligent person, so he was great to have on here. Alternative Hypothesis, as usual, great content. Love seeing him in these live streams. And Sean Last, I wasn't familiar with Sean Last, but he really did bring his A game in this debate, and I appreciated that he was there to back up alt-hype. And of course, JF and Andy did their usual moderating with a bit of interjection here and there. I'm actually surprised that Andy really spoke up against the open borders argument when it came up, and he was actually fairly reasonable and well-spoken about the issue. Now, of course, there's work and improvement that can be done there. He needs to strengthen his arguments. But he was there, he was in the action, he was in the field, and it was good to see him really shine. So first things first, let's talk about ANCAPistan and the open borders policy that Shane Killian is trying to propose here. And I have a feeling he's against the concept of the ethno-state because he's an ANCAP or whatever, but there is some serious issues with the ANCAP stance, and especially the open border stance. So, take a look at this little timeline that I've put together. This is the future of the ANCAP society in the United States. So we have, this is without any current change. Let's say we had the ANCAP state in 5 years or less. So the state gets abolished, of course, because it's anarcho-capitalist. Borders get abolished in return. Now, this does not mean that all of a sudden private property goes away. However, there is a problem with this. Migrants will be able to flow freely into the country. And because we have this culture of mainstream leftism, these leftists and bleeding heart useful idiots will allow these migrants to buy up land and resources almost freely within their populations. Now, because it is a verified fact that third worlders, these sort of migrants that we're getting into the West, outbreed the local population, they will replace us. And in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, unless you get your birth rates up, they are going to form their own state because they will outnumber you and there's nothing you can do to stop them unless you violently repress them, which I would assume ANCAPs would be against such a violation of individual liberties, correct? Or you could try and justify it in the Hoppian way, which is to say that anyone who threatens liberty should be physically removed in the name of self-defense. I'd be more akin to that, but Shane doesn't sound like one of those people. So now that the migrants have replaced you, they've outbred you, they have massively more numbers than you, what are they going to do? Well, as third worlders do, they form states because they do not possess the ability to understand the higher concepts or philosophy of anarcho-capitalism or even libertarianism. I mean, we can't even get some of these people to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be raping each other. You know, if you can't even get past that most fundamental part of society and the rules of social cohesion, you cannot have them anywhere near you. Don't touch them with a 3,000-foot long pole, okay? Keep them out of your society. But now that they are going to form these states, and in particular, Islam, there are people in the Middle East right now, imams, big prominent members of the community, people that I would consider religious radicals. They are calling right now, and this is on video, they are calling for the conquest of the Western worlds. They are saying, go in there, outbreed them, replace them, subjugate them, and then exterminate them. This is all on camera. So that's exactly what they're going to do if you give them the opportunity. They're going to come in, they're going to establish some sort of caliphate, the United States caliphate. It's going to be some form of religious theocracy, which obviously none of us want. Or the African migrants or South American migrants will form some kind of ANC 2.0. And this is all garbage. It's complete trash. We don't want any of this. Especially if you're an anarcho-capitalist, how can you not see the inevitability of these states forming when you allow in these extremely unintelligent populations to be around you? They're going to form a state when they outbreed you and replace you. So now that they have their state, and the United States will probably be broken up into smaller sort of, you might have an African dictatorship here and a caliphate here and things like this. The states are going to break up. It's not going to be all at once, of course. None of these groups are unified. But now that they have higher populations of people than the locals, and it's verifiable that third worlders and non-whites have a higher propensity to statism, which is what ANCAPs are against, you're now going to get this division. And because of how fervently some of these groups hate the West, and that means you, whitey, it is a crusade against you, they are going to subjugate or ethnically cleanse the population. So if we understand the inevitability of these third world or states forming on your territory, is it worth it abolishing the state to secure your natural rights? Is it actually worth it? And here's a caveat that I don't think anyone really thought about. Even if you manage to secure your existence outside of these new migrant states, if you somehow recognize, hey, oh shit, our collective power is essentially zero, we have to form a state in defense of our own populations, even if you manage to do that, you're going to have an extremely reduced industrial capacity because you won't have the entire United States backing you up. You probably won't have easy access to international trade. If you're stuck up in the mountains somewhere, you're not going to be able to get overseas. And the constant threat of being invaded and subjugated by these new powerful migrant states is always going to be hanging over you. So the entire point of having an anarcho-capitalist state is, of course, the respecting of individual rights and the allowing of the free market to really take its course. Well, neither of these things are possible if you do them in the here and now. So with that being said, let me explain something about libertarianism and the ethno-state and the future of the Western societies. I believe that there is a time and place for us to think about libertarianism or the sort of free, liberty-based society. It is still based in the ideals of hierarchy and free trade and things like this, so it's okay. There are some merits to it. But the issue is that in the here and now, it's not feasible, and in fact, it is going to be used as a weapon against us. Until we reach the point where no one in this world is below a certain threshold of intelligence that's required to understand the basic philosophy of libertarianism. Until that point, there will always be external actors that are going to wish to conquer you and take your resources. And until we reach that point, until everyone can recognize individual rights and self-ownership and free trade and things like this, you are going to have to defend yourself almost by any means necessary. And I am willing to sacrifice some of my naturally given rights in favor of state enumerated rights if it means the power of the collective isn't reduced at all. If my ethnic group can continue to exist and be strong and be a part of this world, and we can preserve our culture and our heritage and things like that, I'm willing to have a state. Because honestly, I see the state, if formed by a populist representative of the people, this sort of Volkisch movement that I've talked about before. If you can have that, then the state can be a powerful tool in protecting your group. So if we end up in an ethno-state, which is all of our goals here, if we end up there, I'm not too concerned with exactly what type of governing system we have, so long as it's not leftist or democracy or anything like that. If it's libertarianism or fascism or monarchism, there's a good debate to have between those who are proponents of the ethno-state and how exactly the political system will work in the ethno-state. And this is more of a maybe philosophical or political science type of discussion to be had. It's not to be had with those who have arguments against the ethno-state. So think of it like this. In the here and now that we're faced with this multicultural democratic society, we should vote within our best interest to diminish the power of these other groups taking from us. So now that I live in the United States, I'm not going to be in favor of increased taxation. I'm not going to be in favor of expropriation through social welfare and things like that, because the state is not built upon the interest of my group. They are stealing from us in order to give it to someone who doesn't deserve it, and I cannot be for that. Now, however, in the future, if we do establish this ethno-state, then I would be more than happy to discuss the types of right-wing socialism that can happen in a society. But ultimately, I think this is many, many years away, so it's worth taking the time now to read about all the different systems of governments that you think that you might be for or against. Take some time, improve yourself. We've been talking about self-improvement on the channel a lot recently. I did a video yesterday about how to build work ethic and find a job. So improving ourselves now, becoming more well-read, and then in the future, when we finally get the chance to form the ethno-state, we'll have a better foundation in which to govern ourselves. Other than that, I highly recommend everyone go and watch this debate. It was a lot of fun, and thanks for listening.